Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our second in a series of three Readers Advisory Workshops with Becky Spratford. Today is Book Talk Your Way to the Friendliest Library in Town. And our speaker today is Becky Spratford. She is a Reader's Advisor in Illinois, specializing in serving patrons ages 13 and up. She trains library staff all over the world on how to match books with readers through the local public library. She runs the critically acclaimed RA training blog, RA for All. She is under contract to provide content for EBSCO's novel list database and writes reviews for Booklist and a horror review column for Library Journal. Becky is a 23-year locally elected library trustee, a former board member for the Reaching Across Illinois Library System, and currently on the executive board of the Illinois Library Association. Known for her work with horror readers, Becky is the author of the Reader's Advisory Guide to Horror, 3rd edition. She is on the Shirley Jackson Award Advisory Board and is a proud member of the Horror Writers Association and currently serves as the association's secretary and organizer of their annual Librarian's Day. You can follow Becky on X at RA for All. And I'll turn it over to Becky.
Thank you so much, Katura. Oops, we don't want to give that yet. I ruined it. I was trying to get rid of the thing that says, okay, this meeting is being recorded. There we go. Hi, everyone. Thanks for being back. And I'm so excited. First of all, if you are encountering this recording, or you're here for the first time, you did not see the first presentation, I just want to let you know that I am going to assume you saw the first presentation, which makes this one more robust as a presentation. Much like in the first presentation, I told you a lot of things were going to be talked about here. So again, if you're here and you haven't seen the first, go back and watch it. But if you're encountering this video, please go back and watch the first one first. And then I will see you again for this one. So I'm going to talk to you about how to book talk your way to the friendliest library in town. We're going to have participation, so get that chat ready. Make sure you're ready. But I want to start by telling everybody or reminding everybody that this is how we feel about books. Excuse me. I've given a lot of presentations lately. We're going to hope the voice holds out. This is how we feel about books. But yet this is not how we get to be every day at work. I think that those of you who did the first class know that we did recapture some of this. But today we want to talk about not just capturing it for yourselves, but how it actually works, because there's a power of sharing books. And in fact, we're going to start sharing right away. And Katura's going to help. She's going to put in the chat, which she already has. Thank you so much. A question for you to answer. What book made you forget you were reading? We're going to talk about how to turn those answers into displays later. But what book made you forget you were reading? Please answer that question while I'm talking. And by the way, these questions are open-ended and there's no right answer. What does it mean to forget you were reading? That's up to you. What was the book that made you think about it? For me, I often turn to a book that, especially an audiobook, that I stopped the world to finish listening to. Like I would take extra walks or I would find more chores to do. That's for me. But what is it for you? What book made you forget you were reading? And we're going to work together today to make lists that we can make displays at our libraries. Okay. But there really is a power in sharing books. You felt it when I showed Belle doing that. You know what that means. I'm going to talk to you today, though, about rethinking what book talking means. Some of you are like, she's probably talking about prepared book talks. I am not. So that I want you to make very clear. What I'm talking about is how we can share the joy of a good read and prioritize that sharing, and how we can work on cultivating conversations, not on worrying about people coming up to us, asking us a question and tallying that transaction. This is all based around that first slide in the last talk when I talked about how books are our brand and reading is our business. Our relationships begin here. And so do our increased circulation stats of everything. Now, I want to be very clear. There is that power in sharing books, but we're going to talk about in our rethinking of book talking also that you can book talk anything, not just books. Anything you check out, you can book talk, and I'm going to give you examples. The other thing I want to remind everybody before we begin is that you are a trusted expert. Everyone who works in the library is a capital L librarian. I gave this talk last week in Wisconsin to a room full of 80 people who none of whom had library degrees, because that is That is how important this is. Every single person who works in the library, and I hope you go back and show this to your other staff members, especially those who work at circulation, because they really are the place where book talking happens. You are a trusted expert, and I'm going to teach you how to own it. Okay, let's do that. And I want to just check on people's answers. This is awesome. Thank you so much for the answers. Okay, so let's move on. All right. Every time you want to share books, you must, and I mean must, get in the right frame of mind for sharing. Always. And what do I mean by that? What I mean by that is you want to take the pulse of the larger collection, of your collection, and the larger community conversation around books that you have always happening at your library. I love these answers. Oh, oops. I was looking too much at answers and I went to the next slide. Verity, Midnight Library, these are great. Take the pulse of your collection and the larger community conversation about books. Why is this important for warming up? Because when you warm up in this way, you are thinking about sharing books. Again, remember, I talked to you about prioritizing sharing as the main thing you want to be doing. When you take the pulse of your collection, you can do that by looking at all the displays that are happening in your building. I really want to ask everybody, when was the last time that you actually went around and saw what every department had on display? Not just where you work or not just what you can see from your desk. It is very important to know what everybody in your library is displaying. Why? Because when people encounter those displays, whether they acknowledge it in their front of their mind or it's hiding somewhere in the back, they see what you are displaying. And so sometimes if there's a display in the children's department on great mysteries, well, you might not have a display on mysteries in your department, but somebody's going to ask for mysteries and you're going to be like, why are all these people asking for mysteries the last few days? If you knew children's had a mystery display, you wouldn't be as surprised when adults asked for mysteries. Okay, now, excuse me. We also want to make sure that you're checking the return cards. The unsorted return cards are the absolute best place in the library to take the pulse of what people in your library are actually checking out and taking home. Now, I know that there are many times things end up on the return cards that weren't checked out, of course, but this is the only place where you can really see en masse, unsorted, what is circulating through your library. And in fact, I feel like that's why circulation is one of the best places to have readers advisory conversations and to do book talking, because that's where the books are going in and out. Now, that being said, we never, ever want to ask somebody about a specific book on their pile, because that is an invasion of privacy. But we can make comments about, wow, that's a great stack that you're returning. Do you have one you really liked? You should let somebody know. But just checking the return cards, oh my goodness, you can see so much. Now, that's your library, right? That's what's going on in your library right now. What about the larger book atmosphere, as my colleague Robin Bradford likes to talk about? Well, my favorite place to go for the larger book atmosphere, and because we're online, I'm not going to show it because it sometimes messes things up, but it's bestseller lists. And what is the bestseller list you most want to have? It's the USA Today bestseller list. That link goes to the USA Today bestseller list. It changes every Wednesday. So actually, I haven't checked it since last Wednesday. But what the USA Today bestseller list does is it takes every single book that was sold in America in the previous week, and it looks at those books as which sold the most, not which one is children's, which one is nonfiction, which one is self-published, which one's from a major publisher, which one sold more in print versus electronic. I'm referring to the New York Times bestseller list when I say these things. Often there are books on the New York Times bestseller list that are not high up on the USA Today list. And if you have time later, you should go check it out. But that is really important to see. And that's how people already came up. Colleen Hoover showed up way ahead of time on that USA Today list before they found a way to try to make her be in the New York Times. It was really, they didn't want to, but they had to, right? There are so many authors who you see and because they're, self-published USA Today best-selling authors who are totally there because people are actually buying their books. even if those books do not turn up on the New York Times list. So make sure you're checking the USA Today bestseller list as frequently as you can. Also, you should be checking daily book news. What books are in the media? What books are being, coming out next week? All of those things that you think that you need to know about because people are hearing about in other places. I have a couple places you can go for that. Go to that link to see it. But it's things like the Book Pulse by Library Journal, Shelf Awareness, and the other one is Shelf Awareness and Publishers Weekly. So those are all places where you can go to get daily book news, to get you in the right frame of mind for what the book conversation is, both at your library and in the larger book atmosphere. Now, that is to get you excited about thinking about conversation starters, not specific items. And I'm going to get you there. We're going to get there eventually, but I want to just frame you up for this. Now, recent favorites for conversation starters, we're also going to talk about how to get to recent favorites. Now, if you did the talk last time, you already have some recent favorites or some favorites in general. We're also going to create a list of a couple favorites through these conversation starters today that we're doing. We're going to have 3 of them. You've done 1. If you did the first talk, we talked about finding ways to communicate with your staff what their favorite books are. And then you can have conversations about what patrons are reading by just talking about not specific people and what they checked out or returned, but what you're seeing on displays or in the return carts in your library. And if you're staying up to date on the daily book news and the bestseller lists, you know what their popular books and topics are right now. For example, we're doing this in October. Horror books are popular right now, not just because I'm here, right? It also was we just finished Latino Heritage Month, Hispanic Heritage Month, and we're starting soon Indigenous Heritage Month. Books by those authors are going to be popular. And also, of course, holiday romances are very popular right now. But when you read these news stories that come to you, like yesterday, I learned a brand new topic that I did not know about. There was a whole list through Library Journal about mom-com romances. So they're rom-coms that feature moms falling in love, with in different ways. I loved this. I had never heard of mom-coms. And I'm now super excited to talk about it with people. I saw the email yesterday. I've already brought it up with 2 people in conversation. And it's been really fun to talk about. It starts the conversation about books. And finally, when we're warming up, you want to make sure you find time at least once a week to walk the stacks with no purpose. And I want you to really think about the last time you did that. When have you just sort of walked through your collection and tried to use your eyes as a person encountering it for the first time, not going there because you had a specific book to pull off the shelf or something you needed to do? Now, before we get going, these are a lot of different things. These are just ideas on how to warm up. I'm going to have a lot of things in this presentation. Many, many ways you can share. Many ways you can prioritize sharing your collection and having conversations with readers, because that's the goal we have right here. Having more conversations and worrying less about someone coming up and asking for a book to read and us telling them what book that book should be. Now, that being said, there are many. You're going to get the slides. Do not do all of them. I recently had feedback, and even though I say this, like there were too many things there, and I understand, but I always do say this. I am giving you a wide range of options and a wide range of ways to do things. I'm not telling you to do all of them. What I would love is, and we'll go over this at the end, is that after you take this all in today, you go back and you look at the slides and you think about targeted ways that you can help, both that rely on your skills, your staff skills, and how your patrons interact with your collections. Okay, so let's keep going. There's another question now. Katura's going to help me out. What book do you recommend to everyone you know? Thank you so much for your assistance. I've been looking at all your books, by the way. I love this. One of the great things about doing this online is I get to see the responses right away. When I do it in person, I have to wait a little while, and then like the next slide, I ask people for answers. So what book do you recommend to everyone you know? This is one of my favorite questions. And you can do more than one, by the way. That's fine. What is the book I recommend to everyone I know? I've probably already mentioned it when talking to you, but it's The Only Good Indians by Stephen Graham Jones. It's actually right behind me, next to the hat right there on the shelf. And I literally have it there always to recommend it always. But anyway, that's the book I recommend to everyone I know. Thank you for people who are putting in their responses. I love it. The women, oh, we were just talking about that. Oh, the light you cannot see. Awesome. It's just great. I did it again. I was so excited. I hit the wrong button. All right, now I want to close that. All right, we're going to talk about beginner tips, okay? I'm going to walk you through all these different ways you can share, from some that are really interpersonal to very passive readers advisory. Again, all of you might do something else, but here are some beginner tips in general, because we're trying to change your frame of mind, right? We're trying to change the idea that you're waiting for someone to come ask you for a book. And instead, we're going to model the behavior we want to see. And we are going to actually ask questions like the ones I'm giving you, or have things to talk about to start conversations with readers out of nowhere. Knowing, again, that books are our brand and reading is our business. And anyone who comes in the library will not be shocked if we start a conversation about books with them spontaneously. And in fact, I have found that people enjoy that we take the pressure off them. Remember in the first talk, library anxiety is real? We take the pressure off them and we start the conversation. So how do we start small? You can start by talking about things you've read about, if you do those daily book news, or you know what bestsellers are, or to what you're hearing about, right? So let's say you looked at the return cart before you came to work and you saw that The Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros was on the return cart. You know what that means. It's off holds. I don't think it's true, but let's just pretend, because one day this will happen. I remember like the day that Gone Girl came back, like it wasn't on the hold shelf anymore. And I thought it would be on there forever. And you can even have a conversation with somebody. We're going to talk about using props. Pull that book up, put it out, and be like, I can't believe it. This is the first time in a year this book hasn't automatically gone to holds. That's a conversation starter. Because someone might say to you, oh, I read that and I loved it, right? Or they'd say, oh, I've heard about this book, but I didn't read it. What's it about? And, I'm sure all of you know, but if not, you can read the back of the book and be like, well, it's a romance fantasy hybrid. It has dragons and it's sweeping the world, right? And then you could say, then what book have you been most excited to read about? Or what's the book, that you've heard about that you want to read? Or, one of the questions I have, but it's a great way to start talking about it. So what are you reading about or hearing about? What are you reading about in the news? What have you heard other people talk about? What are your favorites and your coworkers? Again, all of you who did the first one did a reader profile, right? You have at least 3 books. I know you have at least 1 book, even if you didn't do the profile after I came, because we did it and we did an exercise. What is that 1 book that you love? When I asked you, you can share that 1 book. And this goes to the very bottom, but you can practice with the same book over and over again. You don't have to find a different book or a different conversation starter or a different fun fact to share with people, as long as it's different people. It is one of the best ways you can begin small, is take 1 book and talk about it with a lot of people, or 1 conversation starter. I had a training the other day and I was asked what book I recommend to everyone I know. And I realized the book I recommend to everyone I know is All the Light You Cannot See. Thank you to the person who gave that book. And that's an older book. And it got me thinking, why do I recommend that to everyone I know? And here's why. What about you, right? Or, we did the reader profile at work, or you could even say somebody else on the training said this book, or my coworker, when I asked them for a book they love, said this, and this is why. You just want to have a conversation. We're not worried about matching books with readers. Other things you can do. Remember, I talked to you about using the words of others. You don't have to be the one who's even read the book to use it to start conversations, to prioritize sharing. You can use resources. So here are 3 that provide a really good place where you can get the words of others. Book Riot, I really enjoy because, and people say, but Becky, they're all about clickbait. They pay their writers based on how many clicks they get. Yes, they do. And that's great for us. Let's think about it. We don't have time to stay on top of every trend. They do all ages from birth to adulthood. They do all genres. They make sure their lists are diversified. They will not put out a list that is all straight, white, and male. They don't allow it. They send it back, the editors. But they're all on topics that are extremely timely. I have a link that's going out on my horror blog on Sunday, where they did a roundup of all the different articles they did this month about spooky books, and the range is amazing. I don't even have time to do that, and it's my main thing, right? They have many writers and they're trying to get clicks. Everything is annotated. So if you want witchy reads for the spooky season, there's a list and they're annotated. Library reads, you should take a look at it. Comes out on the 15th of the month. It's the list of the books that libraries are most excited about, library workers, for the next month. So October 15th, the November list came out. It was a whole bunch of books that are coming out in November, and they have annotations with read-alikes from novelists, as well as if anybody's on the list more than twice, they get moved to a Hall of Fame. So you can guarantee that the list is always fresh voices. So Nora Roberts would have made the list, but instead she's in the Hall of Fame. Yes, Becky, okay, but I don't want to book talk books that are coming out next month unless it's to take holds. What if someone gets upset that they can't read that book now? Yes, you can use it to take holds, but it also has a read-alike, so you can give them the book while they wait. But I also use it when I'm starting conversations because of the backlist. There are over 10 years of lists. So often I go to the Library Reads archive, which is very easy to find on the main page. And I choose, and I do this all the time. I did this back when Library Reads was new and I was on the desk. I would just take the year before that month. So right now we're in October. So I would go to October 2023 or even 2022 and see what books were on the Library Reads list and book talk those. Be like, a year ago, this book was huge. I never got a chance to read it. What about you? I know we still have it. And then Goodreads, which we talked about a lot in the first time. But Goodreads is a great place to go to find 4-star and 2-star reviews from people who liked the book or didn't like the book and share why. It's also a good place to share with each other, to see what each other are reading and be able to share what people have said about it. But I read reviews by real readers all the time to patrons. And I'll say, well, here's someone who loved the book. And I talked to you about it for Severance last time by Ling Ma. People who love it and why, and people who didn't love it and why. And sometimes the reasons for one are the reasons that it would be for you for the other. Some people don't like Severance because it's just one narrator. And so that's why they give it 2 stars. But for the reader in front of you, that might be great. The whole point here is I'm trying to make it as easy as possible because it is. The whole idea is you want to just start sharing books. Don't be afraid to fail because you cannot fail. You can practice with both trusted patrons, staff, and pets. Let's talk a minute about practicing with those trusted patrons. This is one of my biggest tips for you. The best way to practice is to get those patrons, and you have them, who come to the desk and stay there and are really hard to leave. They just keep talking about things. You are their social outlet for the day. I love those people. They're great library users. They're supporters when you need them, but there are days it's just a lot and you have work to do. Here's what you can do. I have done this with my patrons. It has worked wonderfully. So I would say when they would start doing that, I'd be like, you know what? Can I practice something? I just went to a training and I want to practice book talking this book to you. Or you start with that, and we're going to talk about that on the next slide. Here's a book. It's a book. I was asked to name a book I love, and I had to think about why, and I had to work through it. This is from the last training 1. Can I just try to practice book talking it to you only using appeal? And then you could see what, that would be good. And then what I say to them is, I would love you to do this for me. Can you come back and talk to me about the next book you read or the last book you read and come to the desk to share? Why? Because I'm going to be able to practice to be better, and other people are going to overhear you and they're going to maybe come talk to us about books. How do I know this is true? I had patrons I did this with. I went so far as telling them, I'm going to put a book on hold for you when I order it because I know it's a book you would like. I don't have time to read everything. You're going to read it when you get those books and know it's a book that I want you to come talk to me about. And you're going to come talk to me, and I would love to learn about it from you. I would love to know why you liked the book, not what happens. All stuff I taught you. Then what happens is they come, and I swear this happened to me years ago. Somebody was doing that with me, one of my patrons who came and talked all morning usually. I got her trained to talk to me only about the book she was reading. She was telling me about the book. Some other patron walked behind her, spun on her heels, came back, and gave my patron a reading recommendation. This is the dream, right? This is the dream. So I need you to understand that will happen. And you do that with these conversation starter questions that we're using today. And in fact, you will get more in a handout as well. So you can use that as a way to talk with those people. And it's a great way to practice because you know they want to stay there and talk to you. You need to practice with somebody who's not going to be judgmental, and they're going to help advertise that you do this by doing this out loud. But for those of you who aren't ready for that, you can have time to talk with staff either at the desk or in break rooms, or come up with a way to do this in some training sessions. But also the mirror your pets, practicing what you want to say, and again, sticking with the same book. But let me give you a way that we could actually talk about doing this, okay? This is an idea of ready, set, book talk, okay? This is a way you could try it the first time. You want to prepare a title. I like to say use the book you used as an answer to one of these questions, or the book you talked about last time, you did the exercise for last time. You want to know if the book is there. The first time you do this, we're going to talk about reducing your item dependency. But the first couple times you do this, it's nice to hold on to the book. Why? Well, it really helps you to keep the book center stage if you're holding on to it, but it's a crutch. It's a really good crutch because the book has lots of appeal factor on it, right? The book has the blurbs on the back so you can say, and if you went to my 5 resources you can't live without after the last session, you will know that one of my 5 resources is author recommendations of other books, right? Of other authors or books. A lot of that's on the back of the book. Also, when you open the flap or you look at the plot summary, wherever that is on the book, it almost always now starts with some kind of appeal comment for fans of blah, 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 fast-paced, exciting, right? Heartbreaking, whatever. There's lots of appeal terms in those. So you can use that to help you. Now, when we get to the have an opening line soundbite, but first you want to look for opportunities to book talk. If you work at a desk, it's good to just ask general questions of people, not wait till they come to talk to you. So I would like to say at the desk, if anybody wants to stop over, we have lots of reading recommendations, lots of reading suggestions, just come on by. We don't, we can help you. Sometimes I would get up and go try to encounter people. If you're at circulation, it's really easy, right? And I'm going to give you other ways to look for opportunities, by the way, give you lots of opportunities. And in fact, these conversation starters that I'm doing with you to build interactive displays is a great way, but we're going to have many ways to look for opportunities. Don't worry right now, just be ready, okay? And you want to have an opening line to get people started talking and a soundbite about the book. This is why I really like for you to use the name of the book you love, because you can say, I took a training, I was asked about a book I love, and I was asked to get it down to 3 words, the appeal, and here are my 3 words. What about you? What's about a book you love? Why do you love it? Don't worry, you didn't have the training. You don't need to get it to 3 words. Or, what book made you forget you were reading? What book do you recommend to everyone you know? These questions that I'm going to give you more of and a link to get infinitely more. This is how you can start a conversation. This is your opening soundbite. Because remember, we don't want to talk about the plot. We want to talk about the appeal. We want to talk about why people would like the book. Have that conversation starter. Because when we say things to people like, what do you want to read? Tell me about that last book you loved. This is so much pressure because they don't want to say a book they're afraid you won't think is good enough, or their mind goes blank, or all these things. But when you ask people things like, what book do you recommend to everyone you know? Most people have an answer for that if they use the library, right? Tell me about a book you love from any time in your life. It's less pressure. It's less of that library anxiety. And again, keep the book center stage. It's about your book. It's about their book. It's about who would like it and why. It's about the answer to that question. It's a dialogue back and forth as well. It's a conversation. And what do conversations require? What do dialogues require? They require that you listen and ask questions back. You're going to develop your own style over time. This is just a sort of outline of how things will go the first couple times you try it. I'm going to have so many more ways for you to do this and many more examples. That is just one way it could go. Okay, let's say you don't want to talk. You are somebody who's like, Becky, this sounds like the worst thing anyone's ever suggested to me. There's absolutely no way I'm going to just go up to a person and be like, what book do you recommend to everyone you know? Now, that's fine. We're going to talk about a way to do it in writing and still get the answers in a little bit. But maybe you like talking about books, but don't want to perform in front of people. you can record yourself, either just your voice or do like a book talk. But if you're going to do that, keep yourself to 35 seconds. I say 35 because I tell people 30 and they inevitably go over. So 35 seconds, those are really great. Maybe you actually are really good at writing down what you want to say, but really bad at delivering it because you get too nervous. You can book talk by talking about, by writing about books. So making an annotated list like the ones in Library Reads and Book Riot I talked to you about using. You can also use theirs, but you can make your own. Or you can, again, write down Goodreads reviews, and then you're talking, especially if your library is linking them to each other, you're talking then for on Goodreads that anyone on staff can use that, or any patrons can use that to find books. Maybe you're much more visual, right? I had so many staff that were extremely very visual. We had them create displays. Now, that being said, displays, by the way, are a book talk. Displays are 100% a book talk, and we're going to talk about them in a little bit more detail. But displays need nothing but books. You don't even necessarily need a title. I had a staff member who would just use a picture, no words, and then put books with the display. It was a small display of 12 books, and when the books were out, he put up another picture and did more books. But also these Instagram posts are also great. So if you're somebody who wants to do like a book talk of 5 or 6 books with a certain title, like, books that made me forget I was reading, or books that made our staff forget they were reading, because you asked the whole staff that question, and they just spread the books out. And then they can put, make an Instagram post, and you could even tag them with people's names. There's a lot of things you can do with visual. The whole point I'm trying to make here is, again, I'm going to give you so many examples here. I use the word book and I use the word talk, but we don't have to do just books, and we don't have to just physically talk. There are different ways of talking. And when we think about that and we acknowledge that, we honor the strengths of our staff in their different strengths that they bring to us, but also with the understanding that our patrons also have a preference in how they want to be communicated with, just like we do. Some people don't want to be told about what book to read. Some people want to encounter the displays. Some people want to use your lists that you put online, and some want to interact with the staff. But this honors everyone and gives preference. It's just the most beautiful way to explain the idea of inclusion, right? We're including everybody's strengths, and then we're creating a sense of belonging. All right, let's move on to intermediate tips. And this is the last question I'm going to ask you today. Katura's got this one. What was the book that most surprised you? This is my favorite question. I'm going to look at your answers. Why? This is my favorite question because what surprises people about a book is different. So what was the book that most surprised you? For me, it was Better Living Through Birding. Chris, I forget his last name, but this book surprised me so much because it was about, I'm going to talk why people are doing things, about that Black birder in Central Park who during COVID, a white woman called the cops on him. And it turns out, he wrote his memoir, but it turns out, yes, not only is he one of the top birders in Central Park, Jane Eyre, not only one of the top birders in Central Park, he worked for Marvel for like most of his career. And he wrote the first gay superhero because he's a proud gay blurred Black nerd. I just learned so much more than I expected. So that's why that book surprised me. Some people say I pick a book that surprised me because I thought I would like it and I didn't, or I thought I wouldn't like it and I did. Other people pick a book that surprised them because of a twist. This is the whole point of these questions. They are so open-ended, it leaves room for answers. Lydia, Jane Eyre, that's a great answer. Often classics show up on this. If you would like to share why it surprised you, that'd be fine. But if not, no problem. But a lot of people with classics tell me I was surprised it was still so relevant, right? Verity is a great example. Verity will be in our next meeting when we get together again, Kelly. So anyway, for intermediate tips, keep those answers coming. But you want to push yourself to get better and more comfortable. So find a way, and again, I'm going to have more ways to do things, but you're going to start with a book you feel really strongly about or a question I asked you. And you're going to start getting more and more comfortable just engaging people in conversation about books. But always remember, we're describing the book to its best reader. It doesn't even matter if you've read it, right? You don't have to have read Verity or The Fourth Wing or Sarah J. Maas or whatever these popular books are right now to be able to describe the book to its best reader, because you can use the words of others. you're slowly going to add in books you've only read about. Now, it's funny because doing this talks for so many years, some people tell me sometimes I have much easier time talking about books I've only read about, because I can be very clear, like, I haven't read this book, but here's what I think about it, or here's what people have told me about it. Whereas I'm less comfortable sharing a book I have a strong feeling about, because I don't want to share my experiences, personal experiences, with every patron. That's fine. As I've told you, you can, talk about books that you haven't read. It's fine. The idea here is over time, you're going to increase your spontaneity and decrease item dependence. So here's an idea of how to do that. I talk about using props. What I love is libraries who've done this. And I say, even if you have people that work behind the scenes and you want to get them involved, a really great way is for them to walk around the library at certain times of the day with the book or the item. And actually, it doesn't have to be a book. Anything you have at the library for checkout with, normally you have like a little stand like I have for books on my shelf. And on the stand, it should say, ask me why this item is here, or ask me why this is here. That's all it says. Or you could have someone walk around with that sticker on a book if they don't have a desk to sit at, if they want to participate. And so with props, you have something there, like we talked about, to talk about. Ask me why this item is here. At first, it's going to be there because you thought about the questions I've asked and you put a book there. It's a lot easier to start a conversation when there's a question there and an item. But what I love about this is as you go through and you get to that more, increased spontaneity, I have put books on that, and I've talked to other people who have, or, you know what, someone just returned this and this cover is gorgeous. I have no idea what the book's about, but I wanted it out there because this cover is gorgeous. Or, I just heard someone just returned the GoPro camera, and so I'm putting the little slip here to check it out because it's available, and it hasn't been available for weeks. We're just talking about things, right? We don't have a reason. We're not describing the best reader even. We're just having conversations about things we check out. Especially when you ask things like, or you say things like, this cover was gorgeous, you open people up and you take away that anxiety. Wait, you judge books by their cover? Well, yeah, I mean, their covers are beautiful. I definitely take a look because the publisher's paying a lot of money for those books. Thank you for everybody who shared their books in the chat. Make sure you take a look at that. So there's a way to use props. I have a longer post about it at any time. But the big one is, and that goes to the link for the handout for conversation starter questions to displays. Let's talk about it. This is what your handout's going to look like. It has 7 different conversation starters and how you can turn them into displays. Those questions are, you don't have to write them down. It's there on the link. You're going to get it. What books made you forget you were reading? Turn your answers into a get lost in a good book display. What was the book you had the most fun reading? Turn your answers into fun reads display or list, by the way. What book do you recommend to everyone you know? Those are sure bets, display or list. What was the book that most surprised you? That one's easy. These books surprised our readers. What is your favorite under the radar book? Turn that answer into a forgotten favorites display. What is your favorite type of story? And for this one, use the natural language answers to come up with fresh lists and display ideas. Or, and this is one of those ones about judging books by cover, what is a book you have faked reading? And on that handout, there's a longer post about how you can turn that into a display, but how it takes away some of that anxiety from readers, and they can make a display of all books that they faked reading. It's really fun. And then the additional, I have a link always for anything that's a conversation starter question. Anytime I do them, I tag them. So I have many more, but these are 7 to get you started. Okay, Becky, what do I do with these besides asking people? In this post, I talk about it at length, but here is a way to do this. You want to model the behavior you want to see. You can do all the book talking you want. You can prioritize sharing your collection. You can try to have conversations about books, but if you don't show people that you are serious about it in a variety of ways, they're not going to believe you. And if you model that behavior, they're not only going to believe you, they're going to participate. How? Here's a short version of what's in that blog post. And this is the biggest change I have brought to Reader's Advisory in the last 2 years. And I really, really have been so happy to see how well it's taken off at so many libraries. It's actually been almost 2 years now. What you do is you take these conversation starters and you turn them into bookmarks that you have out at all over your library. Any place there is space, you can make a template. So it can say, please please participate in the following question, or please answer the following question on this book, and when you and return this bookmark. And then you put the question. So in this case, it could say, what book made you forget you were reading? And at the bottom, you say, come back to the such and such library to see your book on display. You put these out everywhere in the library. You put them online on all your social media. You put that bookmark in every item. Again, RA for all. This is for every single thing you do at every age level. You put that bookmark in those books. You do it for a month. You commit to it for a month. Every first of the month, you change the question. You do it for a month. You get back 10% of what you put out as answers, especially in your holds. That's a lot of answers. I started doing this during COVID with people for their curbside so they could keep communicating. People were shocked by the responses they got and how much people want to interact. You then turn those into displays. And here's the thing, these are evergreen questions. So you can have a list of like 12 questions and just recycle them. You can have a list of 6 and recycle them. You can change them up. You keep the answers, because an answer to, what is your favorite under the radar book, that doesn't get old, right? You can keep a database of all the answers, and you can use a Google form for the ones online on your social media. So it collates the answers for you. So easy. And just keep a database of all the answers. Those are displays that go up all the time. Even better if you can make those displays intergenerational or multi-generational, and have a display right when people walk in that have that month's conversation starter question, or the months before a conversation starter question with the new question there, but have that last month's with the answers for books across your entire collection. And here's the thing, you're showing people that you care about their answers. You're modeling the behavior you want to see. When you ask people a question and display their answer, they know you want to have these conversations. They care. That interactivity is key, because conversations require interactivity. You have to show them that you do this. Now, people say to me, Becky, what if someone comes in and they're like, my book isn't on display? Oh, also no names. If they put names, we take them off, of course. My book isn't on display. I don't see it on the display. Okay, because let me tell you, I have seen this happen in real life, and I've been told people, especially adults, kids do it all the time, but especially adults, bring someone in to show them their book, or they come to check on their book, or they tell their friend. I've had people come in and say, my friend told me their book was on display. How did they get their book on display? And you say, they answered a question. Would you like to answer the question? And so they come in, my book isn't there. So we look it up. Oh, it's checked out. The joy they have because their book went out to someone else. Someone else saw your book. They agreed. They checked it out. When it comes back, we'll try to get it back up if there's time. Second, if it's not on the display, you could say, we had such great response. Thank you for checking. You're on our list, but why don't you go to the shelf and get the book and put it on the display? Now, some of you are having hives at me saying that. I know this. They say, but Becky, if people just take books and put them on display, we're not going to know where the books are. Okay, pause. If there was ever a day where every book was supposed to be exactly where it said it was, tell me that day, because in 15 years at the library, I never saw one of those days. Just know, if you're doing these questions, that not only will books get put up there because we're changing them over quickly, they're going in and out. Some people do. I've seen this. They said, oh, they see the question out. I've had this happen. They literally go to the stacks and bring a book to me and say, here's my answer. And I just go tell them to put it on the display. Again, they're having ownership. Here's the other thing about these questions from an administrative standpoint. If your administration is a little wary about asking people for their opinions, I get it. We're there to serve them. Look, our job, many librarians who are in administration who've been doing this a long time are gatekeepers. They're all about, I don't know why. There's so many rules in libraries to stopping the books from being free. I'm here to tell you that your job is not done till every single item is checked out at the same time. That is your goal. And if you explain it that way to an administrator, they're not going to disagree, because increased circulation statistics, I'm a trustee. Like I understand that. You need to open the floodgates and let the books free. So some people don't want you asking questions because they don't want to know what the answers are. But my argument is, someone who did collection development for 15 years, I know what books check out. I don't know what people think about them. So when I see things like, what is the book you recommend to everyone you know? And I see a title I haven't thought about in years, not only am I going to start prioritizing that title, I might use it in other displays as well. I might put it into a book club kit. I might also think about, oh, I can do recommended if you like lists for this book, especially if it shows up. I love that someone said All the Light You Cannot See. That book has come up this year every time I've given this talk, to not to the same question, as an answer to a lot of questions. So I love that it comes up. That makes you think I should be buying more books like The Only Light We Cannot See or All the Light We Cannot See. The whole point is here, the intermediate part is to be interactive, and you must be interactive. I also want to talk to you again. I mentioned I would do this. I really want you to rethink what I mean by the book talk. I hope you got a sense of what I mean as I've been talking, but let me be a little more explicit. Who can book talk? Anyone who works at the library, actually, even patrons. I already told you that. Even maintenance staff. I have worked with 2 libraries now who have allowed their maintenance staff to participate in their book talking. Have encouraged them to participate in asking questions when they're walking around the library, in participating in the staff recommendation shelf, and to also participating in the conversation starters. It all started with a library in Central Illinois with 3 branches. I did an all-day in-service. And what I love about this story is that the administration learned. I said, the talk was different then, because it was many years ago, but I did the first 2 talks you're having as a morning, and it was for all staff. In the afternoon, there were targeted things for people to go to. So the 3rd talk I'm doing for you about genre was only the YA and the adult staff, right? This was for all staff. And so right before, the director called me up and she said, Becky, I know you said everyone should come, but my maintenance staff doesn't need to come to that talk, do they? I'm like, absolutely. Everyone in the library needs to be there. So 3 months after I came, I got a call from that director about something else. And she said, I really need to talk to you about George, our janitor. I said, great. I think I'd met him. I don't remember exactly. She said, Becky, you were absolutely right. And I was wrong. I thought, well, his job isn't reading, so he doesn't need to participate. But as you said, books are our brand. And he really took that to heart. And he took the training without any other training. He works in all 3 branches, and he started going and encountering people in the stacks, and asking them about, volunteering to share the book he loved, volunteering to share. I didn't have conversation starters then, but sharing all the books he was just reading, sharing the books he was excited to read about, and just randomly doing it and engaging the readers in the stacks at the library. People loved it. People at the circulation desk or other desks at the libraries would hear George talking, and they'd say things like, George, come here and tell us about those books. Because George was an older man. He read different books than the vast majority of the overly female or younger male and female staff. George was talking about books that people didn't normally talk about. George was having this friendly nature with everyone. Everyone, all the patrons loved it. In fact, when George wasn't in a building, people asked where he was. They started not only including George on their staff recommendation shelves, they gave him his own shelf. George recommends. They put it online. They had it in every building. And she said to me, but here's the thing that I love. The library's never been cleaner. George was more connected to the overall mission of the library and his job because of the book talk. I have since had multiple libraries tell me, we heard you say this, we included our maintenance staff. I now have 3 libraries I know of with maintenance staff who regularly participate in whatever the all library readers activities are. One library has, the janitor's a grandpa, and another library, it's 2, it's a man and a woman, they're younger, and their English is a second language. And they've been excellent to help diversify their selections. But one's a grandpa, and so he's been helping with the children's department. It just makes me so happy. What can you book talk? You can book talk anything. Remember I told you, even non-book leisure items? Well, here's an example, and this isn't even a leisure item. I had a library who said, Becky, we've heard your talk. We want you, somebody heard it at a conference. They wanted me to give it to their library. And they said, but here's what we're going to do in the afternoon. We want you to stay because we are looking at our databases and we need to make some hard decisions about which to keep and which not to keep. But we're not convinced that we have the correct stats on how they're being used because we haven't outwardly marketed them. And we'd like to use your book talking techniques for displays. Great. So I gave the talk. We didn't mention the databases at all. We had lunch. After lunch, they had made buttons. And the buttons said, ask me about. And then they were pictures of all the different databases the library had, including the catalog. And every single staff member after lunch was asked to get up and pick, or at the end of lunch, to pick 2 buttons, one for a database they feel very comfortable using, that they really enjoy, that they know a lot about, and one that they either don't enjoy using, don't know anything about, never even knew we had. They both said, ask me about. And you are asked to put on the button of the one you love, or you feel comfortable with, and then go find somebody with the comfortable one that you picked the uncomfortable one for, and go start talking to them. They did that though after, I should step back, everyone picked the buttons. Then they had staff, a bunch of staff come up and talk about all the different databases and give you like here's what it looks like, here's what it does, here's what it's used for, very quickly. It was like 30 minutes right after lunch for all the databases, very quick. Then they did this exercise where they got back up again, which is great, by the way, after lunch, to only have to sit for 30 minutes and then get back up again so you don't get sleepy. Then they did this talking to each other. Then they got back, they had about 15 minutes of that walking around. Then they were given the direction, and the direction was, for the next 6 weeks, you're going to wear that pin. And if you work behind the scenes, you have to find time to come out twice, 2 to 3 times a day on work time to encounter people. And it says, ask me about, and you're going to engage people in conversation about that database. And how are you going to do that? They all got the script. We just had our in-service day. You might have noticed we were closed. We had our in-service day at such and such date. And we're really trying to use your tax dollars efficiently and effectively when it comes to our databases. We know that they're important, but we're not sure that people know about what they are. I'm here to talk to you about one of my favorites that we have. And then they would and then they would talk to someone. And they had that little conversation starter. But during those 6 weeks, they were also tasked with on work time, spending time with the database they were least comfortable with. They knew somebody, at least they met somebody with the button that they could have a conversation with, or they could go to the staff member who did the presentation and ask them more questions. Now, they're supposed to use it for 6 weeks to be able to talk about it 6 weeks later. There were instances where people were like, nope, I don't like this at all. It's hard to use, blah, blah, blah. Feedback that was actually very helpful in deciding what to keep and what not to keep. And then they would say, okay, we're going to give you another one here, try this. But they got everyone to participate. Now, I want to say this, if you're a union library, you cannot force everyone to do this. So this was not a union library, but I worked at a union library. So it would probably have to be opt-in for that, or the people who are in those departments, however you would do it. That being said, they did it then with the 6 weeks like that. After the 12 weeks, they then looked at the stats for databases. They never told me their actual results. What they did tell me was they had much better data. It was completely different from before they did any marketing to when they did the marketing. They did also do some online, by the way, marketing of different databases over those 12 weeks. They think they had like 12 databases. That's why they picked 12 weeks. They featured one each week to showcase it. And they did include their catalog in there, knowing that they weren't going to get rid of it, but they thought it was good to promote it and make sure people knew how to use it the best. At the end, they were able to make a real decision. That is how you can book talk anything that isn't a book. You can do the same thing. Where can you book talk? Everywhere. You can book talk in your building. You can book talk online. You can book talk at
Micah.
Okay.
Right
We
now.
want to make sure, oh, people are talking, please mute. We want to make sure that we are talking about books that people wouldn't find without our help. So if you're having a program on the Titanic, don't book talk books about the Titanic. They already know you have books on the Titanic. You can put those out on display, surprise them with something else. Maybe give them a book. Recently, we asked staff what their favorite under the radar books were, or what their favorite forgotten favorites were, whichever language you want to use. And here's the answers we got. Here are 3 examples, 3 completely different books. We have lots of displays like this, or lots of ways you can share your books, or, that's it. You can book talk. But here's the one I want to remind everyone. Please, please, please. If nothing else, if you do nothing else from this talk, please consider getting a cart of some kind of Sure Bet books for adults into the children's department at all times. At the very least, roll a cart in during story time. Why? At any time in a story time, 50% of the people there are adults, yet we do nothing for the adults. In fact, the library where I live, where I'm on the board, started doing this so much. We have a high percentage of English as a second language, Polish and Spanish speaking caregivers that we now have increased, and Ukrainian, we have now increased our foreign language collections of popular materials. They are being checked out like wild because And we have heard feedback from the families who employ these caregivers, how exciting it is for them, for the adults and the children, for the caregiver and the children to both come home with books they want. It just, nothing helps kids see the importance of reading than seeing adults read. But from a logistical standpoint, as someone who raised children, when you bring them to a program at the library, you do not have time for yourself. My children's department was on a different floor than the adult. And even if it were on the same floor, there's no way I would have time to take them to play, to take them to story time, and then to make them go to the boring part of the library, right? But adults need books. Often, again, trustee speaking, we lose parents as advocates. We have them when the kids are little because they're actively there taking them to the library, or they're prioritizing their caregiver taking them, or however they're getting there. And the adults don't have books. Now, if there was a card of books that said, our adult department recognizes that you might not have time, here are some of our sure bets. And then we also have added signs that say, if you need something more specific, please let the children's staff know and they will have someone come help you. And make sure you're letting your adult staff come to the children's department when needed. But quite often, just having a display, having a cart of books for them to peruse is great, right? With anything you have extra copies of, things that are forgotten favorites, just, last year's bestsellers, whatever it is. Because we lose them. They come with their children, and then when their children are old enough to go alone to the library, they don't go. They don't come because they're busy. And then they don't come back to the library for many, many years till they have more free time, till they become empty nesters like me. And let me tell you, I am 49. I am a very young empty nester. My neighbor is 42 and his youngest kid is 3. This is many years that you're going to lose these people. What happens when you have a challenge and you need support? What happens when you have a referendum and you need more money? What happens when you need support in any way? What happens when you want, to increase your circulation statistics if you've lost all those adults who you lost on your own? It is not that hard to bring a cart of books in. That is a book talk. And when can you book talk? Anytime, not only when you have an audience, you can do it online, you can do all these things, you can have staff, you can post their book talks, you can have written book talks, you're book talking with your Goodreads reviews. But my favorite is to let the book literally talk with Post-it note reviews. And what are Post-it note reviews? You do the same thing you would do for conversation starters. You put a Post-it there, and I've had libraries even buy branded Post-it notes now. They love this so much. And you say, please leave a review of this book on the Post-it note. No names, please. One Post-it note. If they give you more than one, you're not using it. You want to talk about why you like a book, not what happens? They fit it on there. Kids love this, but so do adults. You pop it on the book, you put the book on display, and you just say, our readers speak, or our readers recommend books, or patron recommendation shelf, like staff recommendation shelf. You can even have your staff do it. It makes staff recommendation shelf so easy. We did this once for a whole summer just to, get people excited. We had a lady who never stopped doing it. She would return books till the day I stopped working there with a Post-it note on it. And we just put them face out on the shelf near where they would be. It was awesome. That is a literal book talk. So I like to end this slide with that. Okay. We're doing great on time too. There will be plenty of time for questions, by the way. If you have questions, you can put them in the chat now, or you can wait till the end. But even if you have questions after going through the reader profile last time as well, I often get questions after that. All right, so we're going to practice. I always have something that talks about practice, if you noticed that last time. Why? Because nobody can do this without practicing, without doing it all the time, because things change. Not only do you have to get better, but the way I share books is completely different now from when I started back at the turn of the century. The things I talk about, I talk about the conversation starters have only been, it'll be 2 years in March that I started doing this. And it's really only in the last year that I've honed it down and worked with libraries to get it to be streamlined. One of the ways you can practice is to create more opportunities to book talk for yourself, but also for everyone else on staff. Come back from this training, give this recording to someone else, encourage them to watch it. And then we're going to talk about it. We'll talk about that at the end. But staff to staff at the desk can be talking to each other. One of the things we did when I started prioritizing this at my library is we encouraged when there were 2 people on the desk for them to talk to each other out loud, because it advertises your expertise and it shows your willingness to talk about leisure things. So we would talk about what we watched, what we listened to, what we read. We would do podcast recommendations, right? I just listened to this podcast. Here are the books it made me think of. I will tell you, I've had a lot of pushback from administrators when I say, oh, you should be doing podcast recommendations. Excuse me. I'm going to be losing my voice, so I'm going to try to stop it. We should be doing podcast recommendations. And they said, podcasts don't get me a checkout. I know people think like this, I understand, but podcasts have been a great entry point. It's one of the reasons why audiobooks are still going through the roof in circulation. And by the way, digital audio and digital ebooks should be counted with your regular circulation numbers. They're all circulation. Bridge the physical virtual divide, right? Ebook checkouts are checkouts of books. Audio are checkout of audiobooks. Stop doing your statistics and show this to your administrators of here's the things that circulated, here's the paper things that circulated. And all those hoopla and canopy and all those other things that are content are our checkouts as well. Do not diminish them. Anyway, create more opportunities to talk. And some people are like, I don't want to talk about podcasts because they're not a checkout, but they lead to the ebook checkout getting better. And so I encourage staff to talk about everything. What movies did you see this weekend? What movies are you excited about? Whether they're for checkout or not, right? What books are you excited about? What displays do you want to do? I just talk about books at the desk, but also I allowed people as a manager to move to other departments. My department was Readers Advisory. So we were tasked with at least once a week, your job was before or after a shift at the desk to go to another department and to ask them what they're reading out loud at the desk. We took it upon ourselves because we were the department that does this. But soon after doing it, the other department managers were like, oh, I can send my people down as well. It was great for team building. It was great for staff to interact with each other. And it was awesome for the community to see the patrons that our staff members, so much of our services are in silos, like this is AV only, this is fiction only, this is children's only. They forget even because we create so much barriers between services. They forget that we're all one library, and they remember it, but they see the compartmentalization as well. And when we had staff moving around and they saw staff and encountered them in different locations, it brought joy to people and it made them excited to say, oh, you're down here now. Why are you here? Well, I'm here to talk about a movie I just finished watching or a book I just read. And we are making sure we come around so we can see the other departments, see what's going on, but also talk to patrons in different areas. People love it. Model the behavior you want to see. You want them to use the library as a whole and not worry about just little departments, little compartments. Put the adult books in the children's department. Have people walk around. Make sure you're posting things online. The online things are in the building things are online. At my library, we had that carousel on our public access catalog. And we had a carousel of just the new books, right? As they got checked in, they automatically went to the carousel. But we realized people loved that carousel so much that every display in the building, this was so easy for us to do. Every display in the building, as we put the displays up, we checked the books into the catalog. And we had on the main page of the catalog, you could choose a carousel with the title of the display. So currently we have books about elections, not political books, but books about election process, and for all ages in our lobby. Best thing you can do. Books for kids and adults, teens, everybody about democracy, civics, the election. I highly recommend doing that right now. It's a very good idea. And it's not partisan at all. And we have it. It's in a carousel. You can click on it on the main page and you can see all the books, even the ones that have been checked out to the display, but aren't even up yet because they keep them actually behind the little display so they can do it quickly. It's fantastic. There's a great example. We're book talking by having the display out. People are talking about it, but it's also online. We talked about enlisting the help of regular patrons. And again, it all advertises your expertise and willingness. Now, if you really want to get fancy, you can gamify book talking at your library. I have a longer post about how to get book talking at your library and create some friendly competition to really, if people are reluctant, you can do that if you'd like. The whole point here is you're prioritizing sharing your collection. That is what you are doing. That is the priority. That's what you're thinking about with your work. How can I share the books I have to set them free to one day hit that goal of there being nothing on the shelf? You won't hit that goal. But if that's your goal, you have job security. And remember, you are finally living the dream being paid to talk about books. Now, this is my slide with, it also gives me a chance to breathe for you to look at, of excuse busters. These are to the common excuses I get, such as, I don't know how to book talk. I'm not sure what to say. I can't talk about books that I've never read. All of these things are ways you can remind people. So I just got this question a week ago today, actually. Well, I don't really know how to find reviews. If you have access to Novelist, the reviews for the reviews for the book are in every record on Novelist. So you could just look at those reviews and use those as a book talk. But these are all different things that you can do, and remind people that it's not about getting it right. It's about having a conversation. It's also not about getting that book you're talking about into someone's hands. When you make a library where conversations matter, where the people know they're being heard, where you ask them questions, you show them that you're going to put their books on display, they understand that you care, and they're going to be more willing to take more books out. I have seen this happen. When we have a relationship with our community, they feel more empowered to check out a whole stack. I'm looking on the other side of my computer here, and I have a big old stack of books from Hold that I'm not going to ever read. I'm using them to do some research for Summer Scares, which is a reading program I work on. And they're all middle grade horror books, and I'm going to be looking at them and spending time with them. But I checked out 5 or 6 because why not? They're prepaid. They're not free. They're prepaid. People paid for them with their taxes. They're prepaid. I'm getting a better return on my investment. When we have conversations with people, we can say things like that to them. They come back, they're happy, they want to use the library. Okay, as we finish up, I just have a couple of things to help you do a better job at thinking about what you want to display. New books don't need your help. New books don't need to be put on display. Why? They're on display. They have their own display. They're in the news. They're in the media. They're on the bestseller list. Even the ones that aren't bestsellers, you have a new book display. Displays and book talks are meant to highlight books that do need your help, that wouldn't go out without your intervention. We have so many books, right? So many of them are good, but they're hiding in the stacks. New books aren't hiding in the stacks. Books that are in the media or the news do not need your help. And what do I mean by that? I don't just mean the new books, which are in the media and the news, but like book talk books, right? Colleen Hoover, anything that's viral, anything that's in the news because it's a movie. Here's a hot tip. The movie, I think it's like in 2 weeks. Yeah, it's a week from tomorrow, from Friday. Here is coming out with Tom Hanks. It is based on a graphic novel. I loved this graphic novel. It's just called Here. Robert McGuire, I believe, is the author. I actually own it. It actually was one of my favorite books of the year I read it. That book is going to be very popular. A read-alike for it is Daniel Mason's book from last year. The book title is, it's got the lion on the cover. If someone remembers it, put it in there. It's in my talk next month too, when we talk. That's a read-alike for it, and I'll mention that next month when we meet. And anyway, the book talks are meant to highlight books that do need your help, so not ones people are talking about. So how do you do that? You can use those books as like, here's a movie now, H-E-R-E. Here are books just like Here that are both graphic novels and print books, because here's a graphic novel. Or, you know, the book of the year is The Women by Kristen Hannix. I saw a couple people list that as the book of the year, right? Here are read-alikes for The Women. You can do that, right? You don't need the women on display. Or you could just do things like, here are those forgotten favorites that we ask people about. Where are those books? They're in the backlist. What is the backlist? The backlist is any book that is not currently on the bestseller list or currently coming out. So the front list refers to the books that have basically come out the 6 months previously and the books that are going to come out in the next 3 to 6 months. That's called the front list. The backlist is everything else. What do we have the most of? New books or backlist books? We have the most of the books that have already come out. I used to do a talk with the owner of the Book Table, a bookstore in Oak Park, Illinois, that's about to close because they're retiring. And we used to do this talk together about the bookstore and the library and how to work together. And we would begin with Jason asking a question to me. Hey, Becky, Jason, how many Stephen King books do you have at your library? And I'd say, Jason, we have a humongous stack, you know, one whole rack, top to bottom, of every book Stephen King has written at this point. It's more than that. always, unless they're checked out. Some of them we have multiple copies of. He's like, yeah, of course you do. I have the 5 most popular and the 5 most recent, and that's a lot for one author. But I do that for Stephen King. Everything else they have to order. The library has the backlist. This is our best asset. Don't forget it. The bookstore might have the new books and they'll have them, whereas ours are checked out, but we have everything else. And what happens when you have a really good asset? You know, if you want to show off your arms or your eyes or whatever your best asset is, you play it up. But also, and let's go back to talking to our administrators here, it's also our biggest investment. It's our largest investment monetarily. Our investment in the collections is in all the things on the shelf, not in the backlist, in the stacks, not in the new shelf. It's just obvious to see. So play it up and cash it in. So highlight these books. The best bet for your backlist are books that go back 2 to 8 years, with 3 to 5 being that sweet spot. Now, we also want to make sure we audit what we share. So let's go back and say this for a minute. So books, new books don't need our help, but neither do the biggest popular books. So Stephen King, go back and look at your library's horror shelves right now. Do you have any Stephen King on your horror displays? You shouldn't. Why? People know who Stephen King is. I once got told, Becky, I met someone who didn't know Stephen King. Great. It could be like, your display should say, horror is more than Stephen King. And then have all the other books by all these great authors that you have that wouldn't go out without your help. Because Stephen King's going to go out without your help. If someone comes in and you don't have a horror display in October and they want a horror book, they're going to go to the King shelf. When maybe there's an author that's better for them, right? That they wouldn't know about without your help. You don't want to ever have James Patterson on display. You don't want Nora Roberts on display. You don't want J.K. Rowling on display ever, and not just because she's a horrible human being. You don't want her on display because everybody knows who she is. Her books go out without you. Now, that leads me to auditing what you share. Let's go to the bottom one there. We don't want to give hateful books a boost. You have done our training, some of you, with that I did with Robin Bradford, where I talked about this at length. For those of you who didn't, these are some of the bullet points. What you choose to share matters greatly. What you choose to share matters. You need to show people that you are a library that has books for every identity and every way of living and being. You really do. Then you can show that with your displays and your book talks. You should institute a marginalized voices requirement. We can use the ALA Code of Ethics to support that. There's a link there that explains that in the ninth principle of the Code of Ethics is that systemic oppression is real and we must fight against it. So anytime you're sharing books yourself, keep track of how many are by straight white people. When you do a display, make sure that it shows the diversity of the identities of people all over the world, because there's books by everyone, for everyone. And guess what? Next month, we're going to do this. You're going to see it. I'm going to give you books, so don't worry. And when we suggest books, we never want to focus on the person's identity. We always want to focus on the appeal of the story, why someone would read that book. Being Black, being Latino, being Jewish like myself, a book is not Jewish or Latino or Black. It's not a genre. Every genre is included in those books by those people. They're just books with their own appeal. Now, someone may be looking for a certain identity to learn about it, or they might want to see themselves reflected in the book. That's one of their appeal factors then. Really, if you want to understand this very well, this is a 9-minute video called Being Indian is Not a Superpower by Stephen Graham Jones, who wrote The Only Good Indians, who's a member of the Blackfeet tribe, when he won a teaching award at University of Colorado. And he talks about it in a way, and I've been told this by others, it's not just my opinion, that makes all of this so much clearer. So that you can understand it, especially if you are white or, majority presenting as I am. Okay, we're going to be, if you have questions, we have 15 minutes left. There will be time for questions. Anything you can ask, anything at all. Ask me anything about Reader's Advisory, even if it's not from this list. You want some horror recs, we can do that as well. What are you going to do? As I told you, I warned you, I did not want to overwhelm you, but I only have 90 minutes with you. I had feedback from my talk last week that said, I wish she gave me less ideas. And I am going to say to that, I only get you for a certain amount of time. I'm going to give you so many ideas. You can keep going to my blog for more ideas. But the reason I give you so many is because not everything is right for every person. I have no idea what's going to work for you, your team, and your community. So use these slides, go back and show this recording to other people and make a plan for yourself. What am I going to do? Pick one thing from this presentation that you're going to do that you learned. Maybe it's ask a conversation starter question. Maybe it's just that you're going to ask the staff and you're going to build a display. Maybe it's you're going to just start using props. One thing. You're going to put one Post-it note on one book as a Post-it note review and leave it on your desk. Also, though, think about your team. What can we do together to lighten the load for all? Working together is your best resource, right? As a department, what are we going to do as a library? How are we going to prioritize sharing in our community and in our library? Because you're going to be the friendliest library in town. I know you're the only library in town. There's no other way to say it that sounds good. It's a title. But you're going to really show people. You're going to model the behavior you want to see. You're going to show people that you want to talk about books with them. Remember that we want to bridge the physical virtual divide always. It is one of the basic rules of Reader's Advisory. I want to make sure you're thinking about that always, and always be interactive, because conversations go two ways. So if you're going to do something with the library, find ways to ask your community to participate, and also find ways to take regular spins throughout the stacks to encounter patrons. Now, my final thoughts are, every time you finish a book, write down why you liked it. Write down the appeal terms of why you liked it. We talked about this last month, right? Make your notes accessible to yourself and to other staff. Make sure that people can see your notes so they can help people when you're not there, but also make sure you can see other people's notes so you can help people. So I love graphic novels, but let's say I don't read graphic novels, and someone came in and asked for them, and Betty's on vacation, but she loves graphic novels. But guess what? She's made us some lists. She's put some books on the staff rec shelf, and she also has a Goodreads. So I'm gonna go look at her 5-star reviews and her 4 stars and why she liked them. Let's not forget to use resources to share books. I've talked about this in both talks. I'm gonna give you more resources next time. You just want to start conversations around books news, what's happening at your library, what people are reading. One of my favorite conversation starters is it's a passive one. Go to the bulletin board most libraries have of what's going on in the community, and are you looking at that bulletin board? Go see what people are posting and see if there's a way you can turn any of that into a display. Is there an event coming up? Well, let's make a display about it. That's having a conversation about books and the community, showing people that you are paying attention and you care. The conversation is the end goal, not the checkout. And I promise you, if you set the example, your patrons are going to follow you. I've seen it happen. You will start seeing them participate back and forth. And the results, and I've seen this over time, it's increased circulation, yes, because when people feel more of a connection to their library, they're more willing to take more items out, and they're more willing to come back more frequently. And as we talk, we make it clear that you can check the books out, but we don't even care if you read them. We just, take them home and spend time with them, as I'm doing with some of these books that are right there. Spend some time with it, read one of them, return the rest of them. Come use the library more and check more things out and try them out. They're prepaid. You don't have any commitment. You're getting a better return on your investment the more you check out. But also, you have more patron engagement, of course, when you're asking them to participate, and then you're putting their books on display. But they also have better satisfaction with the library when you make it conversation based. That anxiety starts to go away. They feel a connection to you. They feel a connection that you want to engage with them with the library. And they're going to help. They're going to be part of it. So those of you who remember the first talk when we talked about a kitty cat dying, I bring the kitty cat back at this time. Go back and watch that one if you haven't. But also, having a kitty cat in a display is very good. You can do this, okay? It's not that hard. It's literally as easy as a kitty cat jumping up and down for joy. Why? Look at how much joy this is bringing people, this gift. I know it is. It's adorable, right? That's the joy of Belle sharing books. You can do this. You work at the library. You know what's going on. You answered 3 questions. You did it. Like, you've already done it. Now just do it at work. So what is the next steps? It's the practice again. Booktalk titles from your reader profile. We could talk about that if you'd like, that you did last time. Find times and places to have those conversations about books. You will start off literally with I'm going to do this on Tuesdays at 3 before I get off the desk to go do X. And that's okay. Schedule it very consciously at first, come up with plan, and then, again, it'll ripple out. And again, there's another link to the handout to have you help have conversations on a larger scale. It's going to come back to you in your email with the slides and all of that. So just as I planned, we have 10 minutes left. So this is my contact information. Anyone can contact me at any time. You do not have to go through the system. You can contact me directly. All I ask, but ask questions now, but all I ask is that you put the name of your library system in the subject heading, because I get questions from people sometimes like 2 years after I've given a talk to ask a question or a follow-up. And I do really try to prioritize people who just most recently had me come. Don't have to write anything down. All of it will be there on the slides when you get them. So does anyone have a question, or do they want to share any successes of things they did last month as well? I have time. I am here. And my voice made it. That cough drop right toward the end helped. I don't know if I would have made it. You can take the Katura will share the Zoom chat. So even if you're watching the recording, there'll be a couple books from other people for you to use at your library to start these conversation starters. So what I would say to all of you when you get the recording and with the text, you can send out a question. Start with staff, right? So send out, what book made you forget you were reading? We're going to turn these answers into a get lost in a good book display and list. All that's on the handout, okay? Here are some of the answers from the training I went to. Please add your answers by replying to me, or do it as a Google form, I would think, or Teams channel or something, so you can get the answers back. Google Forms are great. I'm not as familiar with how Teams does it, but Google Forms are great because it puts it all into a spreadsheet for you. We mentioned I was the secretary of the Horror Writers Association in my biography. That is the job. I'm actually the liaison between the membership and the board. So I have a member portal for asking. In the member portal, I have a question, ask a question, and it's a Google form, and I get them all the questions. There's a lot. Come to me, and they're sorted in a spreadsheet, and then I can send them off to the person who can answer the question. Google Forms are great. So you can do these as a Google form for your patrons as well online. In person, you'd have to, you do the bookmark, you'd have to enter them, but there's a spreadsheet already there and you can save it. And then when you redo the question with new staff or with patrons 6 months, a year later, you're adding more. So that's a good way to start. If you want to look for an idea, send out an email and say, I just did this training. Please fill out this Google form and we'll make a display. What I love about this too is people are able to talk about books that aren't in their department. So when my kids were in elementary school, I was doing a lot of, I ran the 5th and 6th grade book club for a couple of years, but both kids were in those grades. So for 4 different years. And I became in love with middle grade books, and I was working in adult. So I had tons of middle grade suggestions that I was just giving without being asked to the children's department. But if you did this, you might find there are other people, like the janitor who's sharing picture books now, right? He was asked for what books he really loved, and he started sharing all these picture books. And they found out that these were the books he loved reading to his grandkids. Now they included his voice in their displays when he didn't work in that department.
Well, if there are no questions, feel free to put them in chat or unmute yourself if you have a question.
And again, if you're watching the recording, you want to reach out to me. My contact information is in the slides. Or if you don't want to talk in front of everyone else, that's fine. I would say it would be really fun, because you are one system, to find ways at the system level to do some sharing, to get more voices. Because I know this, you have libraries where there's like 1 or 2 people, right? And you have other libraries that are larger. I just was in an area of Wisconsin like this, and we have this in Illinois. If you can find ways to get everybody on Goodreads from the system, or to ask these questions across the entire system, you could then have displays at your library that include the voices from the entire system. Your answers will be more varied, more diverse, and will help more people. That is something unique by you doing this as a system. That would be awesome. If there was ways that Katura could help facilitate that, you could ask this question to everyone.
Yeah, it's a great idea.
There's another system in New York, the North Country Library System, with my friend Angela. And she does a lot of this now, since I've worked with her over the years. She actually sends out a weekly reader's advisory email and we'll ask questions all the time.
Very good. Well, thank you. Thank you, Becky, and I hope everyone can join us again next month on Thursday, November 21st at 10:30 to noon, when we'll have Becky back for the third and final session on demystifying genre. So hope you can join us for that as well. And I will send out the slides and handout and link to the recording after the presentation today.
It was so great to see everyone. Thank you for participating. I greatly appreciate your participation. Thank you. And those of you on the recording, you can do all these things too. So let me know if you need help. Thank you everyone for taking time, whether you watched it or came live.
Thank you. Thanks, Becky.
Thank you, everyone.